My name is Ryan, and you're listening to the CrimeCast. In this show, we will be talking about true crime cases, unsolved mysteries, and cryptid creatures from all over the world, from the mountains of the Himalayas to the suburbs of Los Angeles. In our second episode, we will be talking about the infamous Dyatlov Pass Incident, in which 9 Russian hikers would be found wearing no winter hiking gear, with some having mysterious injuries and most of their causes of death being hypothermia. Before we start, I want to say I'm very sorry for mispronouncing names or locations, as well as if you hear me switching between Russia and the Soviet Union, as I am going to be talking about the same place. So, let's get into the Dyatlov Pass Incident. The date is February 26, 1959. Location, Kokoro-Falling Mountain, located in the northern Ural mountain range of the Soviet Union, now known as Russia. Now, in the local Mansi tribe language that lives in this area, this mountain translates to Death Mountain, which I will be referring to it during the entire podcast. A search and rescue team had been sent out 6 days earlier would come across an abandoned and badly damaged tent. This tent would belong to a group of 9 Russian hikers that were all from the Ural Polytech Institute that had been missing since February 12th, after not sending a telegram to their sports club once they returned to the small town of Izhar. Now that we know what happened after the fact, let's go into background about these people. A group that would be later called the Dyatlov Group in 1959 would form a skiing expedition. This group was looking to earn their grade 3 hiker certification with their route going across the Ural Mountains in Sverdlovsk Oblast, Russia. And this would make the specifics of this route would have the group heading toward the northern region of Sverdlovsk Oblast into the upper streams of the Lovazd River. The group would be approved by the Sverdlovsk City Route Commission division of their sports group, the Sverdlovsk Committee of Physical Culture and Sports. And the group would be notified on January 8th, 1959 that they would be ready to go on their skiing expedition, meaning it was certified. The main goal of their expedition was to reach a mountain called Oturin, which was located only 6.2 miles from where their camp/tent would be discovered. Now let's get into the members and their causes of death. Igor Dyatlov, who was the leader, was 23 and he died of hypothermia. Yuri Dornitsky, age 21, hypothermia. Ludmila Dublin, age 20, she would die due to internal bleeding from a severe chest trauma. Yuri Krivoskenko, also was known as Gregory, from some sources called him Gregory, some sources called him Yuri, so I'll be calling him Yuri, was 23 and died of hypothermia. Alexander Klovasko, 24, cause of death, hypothermia. Zidia Kolmogorov, age 22, dies because of hypothermia. She was the second female on this trip. Rustem Sulbin, 23, dies of hypothermia. Nikola Trebriska-Brinoskos, 23, dies due to a fatal skull injury. Simon Zoltorov, also known as Alexander, was the oldest member of the group at age 38, would die due to severe chest trauma. Now there was also a 10th member of this group, Yuri Udon, 21, but would have to leave the group early due to some knee and joint pains he was suffering due to a medical condition he had. Now that we know a little bit about what happened after this group would disappear, let's get into their expedition. January 23rd. The group would be given their route books and leave the Sverdlovsk city. This would be the last time their families saw them alive. January 25th. The group would arrive in the town of Iverdel, located in the center of the northern province of Sverdlovsk Oblast. The group would then take a truck to the last inhabited town of Isha, which is where they would send their telegram once they were done with the hike. January 27th, the group would have begun their trek to Kokoro-Falling, the main mountain they were going to, and the next day, Yuri Yudon would start to experience some knee and joint pains, causing him to be unable to continue the hike. This would be the last person to ever see the group alive. January 31st, bit of a huge time gap here with 3 days. The hikers would at this point reach a highland area and begin their climb. This was like their main climb. In this area, the group would store some of their food supplies and equipment for their trip back, since their gear had become very heavy and they realized they couldn't really climb the mountain with so much gear on them. The same area, the group would make camp for the night, and the next day, their plan was to pass the overpass and make the camp on the other side. So this overpass was on Death Mountain. But one thing they didn't know was that their plan would change. It's not known when this happened, but either during the day or night, the weather would have gotten worse, and a snowstorm would cause the group's visibility to decrease dramatically. So they didn't know where was north and where was south at this moment. So due to this, they lost their sense of direction and would start to divert west, heading towards Death Mountain. So really, they weren't supposed to go to Death Mountain. But there was like this, it's really complicated to say, but they weren't supposed to go to Death Mountain, but there was also this overpass that was near Death Mountain that they were actually supposed to climb. The group would finally realize their mistake, but instead of going downhill, which was around 0.93 miles, so not even a mile, to a forested area that would provide the group some sort of shelter from the weather, they would make camp on the side of this mountain. Now it's unclear why Igor decided to set up their camp on the side of Death Mountain and didn't go down to the forest, but Yuri speculated that, quote, Dyatlov probably didn't want to lose the altitude they had gained, or he decided to practice camping on the mountain slope, end quote. The search begins. Before the group left for this trip, Igor agreed to send a telegram to their sports club once they returned to Vesha. The club would then expect the group to return around February 12th, but Yuri was told by Dyatlov that the arrival of Vesha would be much later than expected. So, by the 12th of February, no one was really worried. Expeditions like this one are common to have delays due to weather and stuff like that. February 20th. At this point, relatives of the hikers began to demand a search and rescue operation when they had heard no words from anybody. So the Ural Polytechnic Institute would send out the first search and rescue team that was made up of students and teachers and teacher volunteers. So these students and teachers volunteered to search for the group. But soon, within days, the Soviet army in Militisa, or police force, would join and take over the search. Shortly after, the Soviet army would order for helicopters and planes to be used during their search. So this is like what many people find strange is that within days the Soviet Union was a part of this, and that's of course part of many of the theories that we will be getting into later on in the podcast. Findings. February 26th, around 6 days after the search party was sent out, a student by the name of Mikhail Shavanda would make a shocking discovery. Shavan would be the first person to find the group's tent. He would state, quote, the tent was half torn down and covered with snow. It was empty and all the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind, end quote. After discovering After this discovery of the tent, investigators would begin searching around the tent for any signs of what happened to the hikers. But what they found was both shocking and mysterious. While looking around the campsite, it was found that their tent had been cut from the inside, as well as 9 sets of footprints heading both down towards the woods below and on the other side of the mountain. The footprints showed that the hikers were only wearing socks, single shoes, and even were barefoot at times. Investigators would begin to follow the footprints. While following the footprints that went to the other side of the mountain, they would be covered by snow within 1,600 feet. So they had to stop that. So then once they found this, they decided to head downhill where the other set of tracks were, the bodies. While heading towards the forest, they saw the remains of a small fire by a cedar tree at the forest edge. These bodies belonged to Yuri Krivskinko and Yuri Dornishko, who were both only wearing underwear and were shoeless. And around this time, the weather was around -13 degrees Fahrenheit to -22 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was very shocking that these 2 men would run out with only wearing their underwear and no shoes at all. Even though it was ruled out that the men had both froze to death, they also had burn marks and multiple abscesses, meaning that it showed that they were trying to climb the sea, just marking of the fire and other bruising and stuff. Now, what's shocking is that what the bodies looked like. Dornishko had a brown purpley complex and had already gray foam coming from his right cheek and had gray liquid coming from his mouth. And investigators would find it odd that these bruises was maybe the reason or a sign that the men had tried to climb the cedar tree as there were broken branches. So it was showing that these 2 guys were trying to get away from something or someone. The next set of bodies would belong to Igor Dyatlov, Zidia Kolmogrov, and also another man, Rustem Solobin. Due to the location of Dyatlov's and Zinadad's bodies, it was speculated they had died trying to get back to their tent, while Rustem's body would be found with a fractured skull, also trying to get back to camp. Now, Rustem's fractured skull seemed consistent when a person falls and hits their head over and over again, he had just fallen multiple times, causing him to die of a skull injury, but that's really all that was found in this set of bodies that was odd. Now let's fast forward a few months. Around 2 months later, the last 4 hikers would be found once all the snow was cleared out. So they found this ravine, which is around 75 meters deep into the woods. It showed that this ravine was made by the hikers as a small shelter for them to hide from the elements. These bodies would have the strangest injuries to them. Nikolai would have a caved-in skull. Alexander Klovasto would have a deformed neck and was missing his eyebrows. And lastly, the bodies of Semyon and Ludmila were both found with multiple broken ribs and missing their eyes, while Ludmila was also missing her tongue. Very weird circumstances. Based on the clothes that this last group of hikers were wearing, suggests they had died at a later time, and also took the clothes from others. Ludmila's foot would have been found wrapped in a piece of old plants that had belonged to Yuri Krivonisko. Semyon was found wearing Ludmila's fur coat and hat, suggesting that she had died before him. What is shocking is that the clothes belonging to Krivoshenko and Ludmila had evidence of radiation on them. And what's odd is that they actually were looking for radiation for some reason. So let's dive into what the prosecute Lev Avan had to say. He was the criminal investigator in the case, who would state, quote, "The cause of their demise was an overwhelming force which the hikers were not able to overcome," end quote, which is the main reason they had died. Now that we know a little bit about what happened to these hikers, or what we think happened to these hikers, let's take an even closer look about the theories that surround the Dyatlov Pass, with 4 of the most popular theories: the Mansi people killed them, aliens, the Russians were doing secret military weapon testing, and lastly, the most popular theory, the Yeti, the cover-up. Right after the Russian government had become involved with the case, they were quick to close the case. They would give a vague cause of death for the hikers, and the government would believe that it was the hikers' own fault for their deaths, or even a natural disaster was caused, such as an avalanche. This made many people question and come up with their own theories of what actually happened that February night. The Mansi theory. The Mansis were a group of natives of the Ural mountain range and were largely peaceful. They were very peaceful people, and they would become one of the main suspects in the earlier days of their investigation. It was believed they killed the hikers for walking on sacred land, or as part of a sacramental ritual. Another reason that the Mansis became the main suspect is because they lived close by the campsite and also interacted with the group while they were hiking towards the mountains. Zendaya, who would say in her journal while hiking, stating that, quote, "We often see Mansi signs on the trail. I wonder what they're writing about," end quote. That's what she wrote in her diary one day. Another group member's diary read, quote, "Mansi writing appeared on the trees. All sorts of obscure, mysterious characters," end quote. So that's from another hiker, we don't know who, though. Let's get into how this theory was debunked. It was because of the misunderstanding of the Mansi culture and rituals. Also, because of some of the injuries of the hikers could not have been caused by a person. Now, people who believe in UFOs believe that this theory is maybe plausible. The UFO/military weapons theory. Let's get into the UFO theory first. In 1990, the leader of the initial investigation, Lev Ivana, would publish a sensational article. In this article, he would claim that he was ordered to censor some of the key findings, and he would talk about the unusual char marks found on the trees that were nearby the bodies. Lev would say that the char marks, quote, confirmed a source of heat ray, end quote, as that it was possibly pointed at the hikers. Lev would also talk about the strange sightings of floating balls of light and other weird phenomena that had been seen in February of that year over the Ural Mountains. Also, in one of the hikers' photographs, which I will leave a link to in the description of the hiker photos, it's seen that it was their balls of orbs and such, but that was also believed to be water damage or some sort of damage to the film. The military weapons. The people that believe in the military weapon theory thinks that this is because of what the corpses looked like at the funerals. The bodies would have a slight orange withered cast to them. Another reason for this theory to be the most popular is because of what other groups of hikers saw that same night. These hikers were camping around 50 kilometers or 31.1 miles from the Dyatlov group's campsite. This group of hikers said they saw strange orange orbs floating around Death Mountain that night. So it's really not sure what this could be now, but that's probably also why maybe the Russian government was brought in so fast and why they closed it so fast as to hide their evidence. Now, let's talk about one of the most popular theories, is the Yeti theory. The Mansi people, once again we're going to bring them up, will talk about the, quote, mink, which is another name for the Yeti or Bigfoot, as people here in North America knows the creature as. This theory would explain why some of the hikers had mysterious injuries to them that a person couldn't cause. Also, many people believe once again a photograph was of the Yeti, but that's proven to be false because, well, there's no other evidence and it was probably just one of the other hikers. So, what really happened that night? Even though the Russian government would reopen the case in 2019, it would be closed again after finding no criminal activity, which could have caused their deaths. Finally, in July of 2020, investigators would confirm that the hikers had died of hypothermia after an avalanche. So that's basically what they died of. And to this day, the case still remains unsolved. Wow, pulling a page. BuzzFeed Unsolved. So, what happened to those 9 hikers? What actually happened? Was it the Mansi people, UFOs? Could it have been secret military weapon testing? Or was it the Yeti or mink that killed the hikers? To this day, like we said, still it's unknown, but I believe that maybe it was the Yeti or mink, but there's no really photograph evidence in their cameras that maybe they were being followed by this mysterious creature. This was the bizarre case of the Dyatlov Pass Incident, in which 9 Russian hikers would be found dead and wearing only their underwear, with some of the hikers having mysterious injuries and some found with radiation on their clothing. The Russian government to this day believes that an avalanche caused the hikers to leave their tent and died of hypothermia due to being away from the tent. But many conspiracy theorists believe in the UFOs, the military wrappings, all the theories we talked about today. I'm really sorry this episode took really long. Finding something that happened in different countries such as Russia, it's very hard to find stuff, especially since it was the Soviet Union, and they really tried to cover that up really fast. I promise you though, in our 3rd episode, we will be talking about one of the most famous paranormal cases in the US. That is the case of the Conjuring House. This house became famous after paranormal team/couple Ed and Lorraine Warren investigated the house in 1971. And then it became a movie series called The Conjuring, released in 2013, with the newest movie being released in 2021. And I will be having a special guest for our 3rd episode, so stay tuned for that. I promise you though, these episodes will be coming out on a regular basis, starting hopefully this month, and hopefully I will be posting on Halloween, which will be that Conjuring series. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. Yo, why did I say peace? Anyways, bye.